Formula 1 narrowly avoided disaster on more than one occasion in the opening moments of the British Grand Prix. Not only did Alfa Romeo driver Zhou Guanyu escape unhurt from a terrifying first corner crash, but the resulting red flag saved us from potentially witnessing a tragedy, as it meant protesters that had invaded the track after the start were not encountered by the cars at racing speed. After those two situations fortunately played out without anyone being harmed, the small matter of a sporting contest took place, and that was filled with plenty of drama as well, particularly for the championship protagonists. Everyone in F1 was massively relieved when confirmation finally came through that Zhou Guanyu was okay after the first corner accident that led to his car skating along upside down, then vaulting the tyre barrier and coming to rest behind it. Zhou's car was tipped upside down at speed when Pierre Gasly looked for a gap between the Alfa Romeo and George Russell's Mercedes. The contact between Gasly and Russell turned Russell's car left, causing his left front wheel to make contact with Zhou's right rear, dramatically turning it over on the approach to the first corner. Zhou's car then slid across the asphalt runoff at speed upside down and then into the gravel trap. The car then dug in, flipping it back over. As it did that, it leapt into the air, clearing the tyre barrier entirely. The car was prevented from travelling any further towards the grandstands by the catch fencing. Fortunately, Zhou's car went into the fence at an angle that protected his head, as while he had the added security of the halo around his cockpit, the upside-down trip through the runoff and the impact with the gravel had damaged the roll hoop above his helmet. The scary nature of this accident didn't end there, as Zhou's car came to rest on its side behind the tyre barrier he'd vaulted. That made the extraction process incredibly difficult for the recovery crews, as the car was wedged between the armco behind the tyres and the catch fencing that was set back from it. Russell, who abandoned his damaged car to run to the scene of the accident to check on Zhou, said F1 needs to learn lessons from the position the Alfa Romeo ended up in, as it left Zhou with no way of getting out of the car on his own. Once it was established that Zhou hadn't suffered any serious injuries, he was kept in the circuit medical centre for monitoring. He was eventually declared fit and released from the medical centre, and was seen in the paddock during the race talking to F1 boss Stefano Domenicali. Williams driver Alex Albon was sent to hospital for checks after being involved in a secondary incident at the start. Albon backed off in reaction to Valtteri Bottas slowing as the Zhou accident took place just ahead of them, but Albon was hit by an unsighted Sebastian Vettel. That sent the Williams into the concrete pit wall on the inside of the track, and it was then hit again by Esteban Ocon and Yuki Tsunoda. In addition to the news that Zhou and the other drivers involved escaped serious injury in the dramatic crash, there was perhaps another unexpected upside. The red flag at the start of the race appears to have coincidentally prevented a very, very dangerous situation arising following an attempted track invasion. Northamptonshire police had warned ahead of the weekend that credible intelligence informed them that protesters planned to enter the track during the Grand Prix. And while the first lap crash was being dealt with under the red flag, it quickly emerged that several people had got onto the circuit on the Wellington Straight. An F1 and FIA statement said these people only attempted to enter the track after the start, but images from trackside and the onboards from several of the cars clearly showed them sitting on the circuit. 5 protesters from Just Stop Oil invaded the circuit as the leading cars were going past, fortunately at reduced speed due to the red flag. It's the latest in a range of protests from a group demanding that the UK government calls an immediate halt to new oil and gas projects in the UK, and it has pledged to continue to disrupt sports, cultural events and oil until this demand is met. Fortunately, the rapid suspension of the race meant the cars returned to the pit lane at the end of lap 1, so they never reached that part of the circuit a second time while the track invaders were present. A couple of cars did encounter them after they sat down on the track, as the heavily delayed Yuki Tsunoda and Esteban Ocon trundled past at low speed. But as they had damage and were under red flag conditions, they were at least going very slowly and there was space to pass safely. F1 and the FIA said the matter is now being dealt with by the local authorities. Protests have taken place at Silverstone before, most recently in 2020, when police arrested 4 Extinction Rebellion environmental protesters who snuck into the track at the start to hang a banner. But this year's example bore a closer resemblance to 2003, when a priest got onto the circuit and ran down the hangar straight during the Grand Prix and came quite close to being struck. Had the race continued and a full grid of cars made it round to the Wellington Straight with those protesters on the track, the outcome could have been horrific. You would hope the invaders would have been spotted and the race suspended anyway. The point is, the red flag inadvertently prevented F1 from having to rely on sharp eyes from observers and a swift response from officials, and may well have averted further disaster. F1 boss Stefano Domenicali condemned the protesters, saying the track invasion was totally stupid and not acceptable, while Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel took a slightly more sympathetic view. Vettel said he sympathised with their fears and anxieties about the future of the planet, although he questioned the decision to risk the lives of drivers and marshals. Hamilton's first response when he was asked about it was big up those guys, and he later added, "I love that people are fighting for the planet and we need more people like them." Mercedes then later followed up Hamilton's comments with a clarification, saying Hamilton was endorsing their right to protest, but not the way they did it. When the race finally restarted, the record crowd at Silverstone was treated to a dramatic afternoon of action, with plenty of drama involving the World Championship contenders. Championship leader Max Verstappen ran into trouble while leading the race when he hit debris on track from the collision between the AlphaTauri teammates. He dived for the pits thinking he had a punctured tyre, but it turned out this was just his car handling with almost 20% less rear downforce. That's why he then repeatedly complained about his car's handling when he rejoined, and at one stage even declared it broken. Verstappen battled on in the lower reaches of the points with floor damage, but that opened up an opportunity for Ferrari and Charles Leclerc to make big inroads in the championship. Leclerc appeared to have the race under control when Esteban Ocon's Alpine stopped at Copse Corner, triggering a safety car with 13 laps to go. Ferrari decided to keep Leclerc out on track in the lead on hard tyres, while it pitted Carlos Sainz from second for fresh softs. Behind him, Lewis Hamilton, Sergio Perez, Fernando Alonso and Lando Norris all pitted during that safety car period. That left Leclerc vulnerable to attack from several cars on fresher, softer tyres. His spirited defence lit up the closing stages of the race as an incredible battle broke out between all the cars fighting for second, while Sainz scampered away to a popular first F1 victory. Leclerc eventually dropped to 4th place, meaning he only made up 6 points on Verstappen when a possible swing of 19 was up for grabs. After the checkered flag, he voiced his dissatisfaction on the radio with the way Ferrari handled the race, which appeared to also reference the team's hesitancy to use team orders when Leclerc wanted to get ahead of Sainz earlier in the race. We didn't get to hear too much more of what Leclerc really thought about how Ferrari handled his race, as he was intercepted by a stern-looking Ferrari team boss Mattia Binotto in Parc Ferme, who almost certainly told him not to voice his true feelings before the team could debrief properly on it. Binotto defended Ferrari's strategy to the media after the race, believing that the team made the right decisions. He said it was compromised compared to the other front runners in the race because it was the only team with 2 cars in contention, which is true as Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren and Alpine all only had 1 car to focus on at the front. There's lots more to get into on Ferrari's eventful British Grand Prix, so we'll do that in the next video on our channel. Make sure you're subscribed to the race so you know about that as soon as it's released, and as always we'd like to give a huge thank you to those of you who already support us by subscribing to our channel.